Welcome to our Italian Summer Shorts, a short series from amongst Romans to help you travel smarter, deeper, and cooler this summer. Let's imagine that you've planned your dream trip to Italy from beginning to end. You've booked the hotels, you have activities lined up, you have your perfect itinerary, you know exactly what you're going to wear, where you're going to go, and what are you going to see. Well, there's one little things that you might have not thought about that might affect your trip in Italy, and that is unfortunately a strike. And I'm talking about transportation strikes. Transportation strikes in Italy are very frequent. I must say that when I was traveling to Italy, I didn't really think too much of them or didn't really pay attention to them because we always rented a car. So we always traveled, we drove everywhere. We didn't really rely too much on planes and buses and trains and so on. But having lived here for a while now, and I travel by train a bit more frequently now in Italy, you cannot get away from the strikes here, and they are very frequent. So how can that impact your trip to Italy? Well, let's just start with what the strikes are really about. Maybe the strikes where you live are very different. I know they are in Canada. So the way strikes are done in Italy is very different. They are sporadic, but also planned, if that makes sense. They're usually advanced ahead of time, so you know exactly when the strike is coming. And the strike is only for maybe a few hours or affects different functions of people who work in a certain area. And then everything is fine. So you might think, are they really random? What's happening here? It's actually rooted in the work and culture here. After the war, the Italian constitution made it a right for workers to strike. And it's a way of employees or workers protesting about whether it's unfair wages, better pay, safer working conditions, and so on, just like strikes anywhere else. So sometimes you'll have Italians going on strike, and this happens across all sectors. It's not just transportation, but transportation are the ones that make the most news and can really affect you the most. So again, how do they work? It's not uncommon to have a nationwide strike once or even twice a month. Sometimes they affect certain areas like airports or trains or different functions. Sometimes it's the people who load the luggage onto the planes. Sometimes it's the traffic control. Sometimes it's the actual people who drive the train. So again, there are very strict rules as to how these strikes come about. So most, like I said, are announced weeks in advance. They usually last between 4 to 24 hours. You're not going to have days or weeks of people picketing and disrupting everything. The government requires essential services to keep some operation running. So again, there's some parts of airports, even if they're on strike, they will still operate in certain areas. For the trains, for example, it means that certain routes will operate as guaranteed service, but they might be shorter and there'll be fewer of them. Sometimes you'll have strikes from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or starting at midnight or very randomly during the day for a few hours. And, they can be all day, they can be for the few hours, and sometimes it switches. So when the strikes, they do impact train schedules, and there'll still be trains operating. So like I said, there's some guaranteed trains that will be running during the strike. When it comes to flights, there are often shorter strikes related to airports, and they're meant to disrupt. Your flight might be delayed or postponed. You're able to find out where the strikes are happening ahead of time. This helps to do this before you come to Italy or while you're already here to just keep an eye on the strikes that might be happening. So again, they're planned in advance, meaning that you'll know exactly when it's happening. You'll know how long it's going to be for. They have rules that you can follow. If your train or flight gets canceled, they have to either rebook you or give you a refund. It's also good to keep in touch with the airline company. Not all flights might be canceled. It might affect certain airports. So the airport you might be flying out of might be affected or might not. It's always good to check with the airline because they will know best whether your flight's going to be canceled or delayed. You can also set up Google Alerts. There's news about Italian strikes all the time. Even if you are not quite sure what's happening, there is the Italian word for strike, which is scioperi, and you can set up Google Alert for it and it will come to you. Now, like I mentioned, there's ways of finding out beforehand when the strikes are happening. There's the Italian Ministry of Transportation that has their own site, and they have information about strikes. I will link that in the show notes so you can have that link handy. And like I said, Trenitalia, which is the largest train network here in Italy, they also have like alerts. So I will also leave a link for that. It gives you information on what to do if your train is affected by a strike. So what happens to your tickets? Sometimes your tickets will still be valid. So your flight or your train might still go on as planned. It just might be delayed. If it's canceled and you're not able to get on that train, then you can ask at the train station or at the airport for the next flight, and they have to put you on the next flight or give you like a refund. It also helps if you have insurance whenever you buy tickets, especially if you have insurance like we had on our Canadian credit cards. It's a clause that if your flight is canceled or something happens beyond your control, you can get a refund or they will help you with finding a new flight. Keep your receipts. Always have your tickets with you if you bought it from a certain airline. It's always good to check. Sometimes just because a strike is happening on a certain day, it doesn't mean it will affect your particular flight or train. So again, the airlines are required to help passengers with canceled flights. Like I said, either you'll be put on the next available flight or you can get a refund. That's a guarantee here. It happens so often here that they are aware of those situations and they're not likely to give you a lot of hassle because it happens, right? It can happen during your trip and it's not something you personally can control. How to plan for strikes in Italy? It's always good to have some buffer days around important travel dates. If you have a flight home, let's say you're leaving from Rome or Milan, I always recommend getting to that city the day before, so at least you have some time in advance. If there is a cancellation and you have to stay in town, or you have to get there early because there might be a delay in going through security or checking your luggage in, you don't want to leave things to last minute or get there late and miss your flight because your train was delayed or something like that. Book flexible tickets if possible. You are able to find out if there is a train delay or flight delay. You are able to find out about the strikes about a month in advance. If you're planning on coming to Italy in July, they know when the strikes are happening. If you're coming in August, you can always check that ahead of time. Now, sometimes they don't announce the strikes till 10 days ahead, but they do announce them enough time to give you some buffer, some room in there to either make different arrangements or just conform with either your airline or your train provider that your flight or train is still on. It's always good to have a backup plan. We've always rented cars, so we never really bothered with the trains, with the buses. But if you're not able to do that, again, plan ahead of time. There's always bus companies. There's a private bus company called FlexiBus, and they will operate during public transportation strikes. So that's also a great option. Like I said, you can also rent a car. Sometimes it might affect your trip or it might not. If you are stuck in a place because of a strike and you can't leave or you can't get to your next destination, that's a good time to explore local attractions. So maybe it's time to take it easy and have a break that day or use it to recharge. I know it's not ideal, but sometimes you can't really do much about it. When in doubt, check with your host or the people at the hotel, tour operators. They're usually very in tune with any strikes that will be happening because they deal with tourists coming to Italy from outside that might be traveling within different parts of Italy. So they will be very attuned to what's happening, what the strike is about, what functions are affected, what airports are affected. I remember one time I was flying during a strike, but fortunately my airport of Naples was not affected, but the one in Milan was. So again, sometimes, it depends which airport. It's not likely that you'll have major airports like Rome and Milan striking at the same time, but you never know. Sometimes it could be a different function, like I already mentioned. So sometimes it could be the luggage people, another time could be the people who do something else. So you will never be the same type of strike. It will just be an extension. Like these guys will go on strike during this time to this time, and then the next one will go from the afternoon shift type of thing. So again, what is the best thing to do during a strike? The best thing to do is check the official sources for updates in the days leading up to the strike, and especially when the strike is happening. If you get to the train station and there's a strike and you can't leave, it's a good idea to find out how long it's going to last, because you don't want to leave and then, your train can still go ahead, or you don't want to get there too late because the guaranteed train will be leaving, but everybody else is already lined up. So you're not going to be able to get on that train, which again will be very inconvenient because you can't get to your next location. It's also good to keep some cash on hand. In Italy, you can pay for everything with your credit card or phone to pay for things, but having some cash is always helpful, especially if you need to get a taxi, bus, or food. Sometimes they have vending machines, depends on where you are. If it's a pretty decent train station, you will have an actual place where you can get food, but if you're not able to, it's always good to have some cash on hand to keep yourself nourished during the wait. There's nothing worse than being stuck somewhere, especially on a hot summer day with your luggage and you're exhausted, which is not fun at all. I guess the main point I want to share with you is that strikes in Italy are inconvenient, but they are temporary. They're not going to last all day. Don't see this as a huge obstacle to your trip. If you plan ahead of time and research when the next strike is happening, you're able to adjust your schedule, pick the days where you're traveling, knowing that the strike is happening on a certain date. I will leave in the show notes more links to where you can find this information and you can stay on track. Don't let that discourage you from traveling to Italy, because there's lots of stuff to see and do here. And it's not like these strikes are only happening during a certain time, because they happen all year round. Sometimes it's very common to have them more than once a month. Sometimes it's just once a month. Last December, they paused for the holidays, which makes it convenient if you're traveling at that time. But if you're not, it doesn't really help you. Strikes in Italy are going to be something that you might encounter no matter when you're visiting. Being prepared will help you navigate your travel plans and what to do during the strike. Knowing where to go and what your rights are will help you navigate the system and make sure your trip doesn't get ruined. I hope this information is helpful for your trip. When you're planning your next trip to Italy, make sure to look up the strikes when they're happening so you're not stuck somewhere and end up being disappointed.